Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's dev.life session. My name is James Faulkner. I'm the community manager of Liferay and Liferay's open source projects. If this is your first time at a dev.life session, what we do is we do regular hangouts talking about developer topics relevant to developers such as yourself. Today we're going to be talking about Liferay IDE and Liferay Developer tools. We have with us Greg Amerson. Greg, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me, James?
Yes, I can hear you. So we'll get to Greg in 1 second. Thanks again for joining, Greg. We do these every so often. Want to do them every 2 weeks. Sometimes we have periods in between. That's more than 2 weeks. But as we approach the Liferay 7 release, we will be doing more of these sessions around Liferay 7 because it's going to be an interesting time for all of us. There's lots of really awesome new stuff in Liferay 7, lots of architectural changes, lots of new features, and lots of things for developers to know and learn about Liferay 7 and how it affects you. So this is the first of many, hopefully, sessions. So we'll be having Liferay experts on both from within the company and from our open source community. And if you're interested in doing a session yourself, which is a great way to build your rapport and your resume, we would love to have you on. Just let me know. And if you do that, we'll give you a nice, excuse me, a small gift of appreciation. This t-shirt you can see here. You'll get one of these in the mail, or if you attend one of our sessions or one of our events in the near future, we'll hook up with you there. So let's see, what else? Also, if you want to ask questions during this session live, you can do so through IRC. So we have an IRC channel. On the home page of the dev.life, there's a small box underneath the video player which allows you to join our IRC chat room and ask any questions, and we'll get to them as quickly as possible. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So again, this session is also recorded, so if you need to drop off early, you can do so and then check out the video later on YouTube. We'll post links to it and we'll have follow-up content for you. With that, we are going to get started today. So again, today we have Greg Amerson, our lead Liferay developer, tooling engineer, and expert in all things Liferay developer related. Greg, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, James. Thanks for the introduction. And off the bat, I'd like to say, yeah, first, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share, or just to kind of give everyone an update on the developer tooling landscape for 7.0. I want to apologize. Actually, I've been in transition the last month or so. My family's been moving from China, where we've worked and lived for the last 4 years with the team out in China. And we've been moving back to the States, and so I'm a little bit disheveled. And so my demo today might display that a little bit, so I want to apologize in advance for parts of it that are not so ironed out. But I do want to give people a flavor of what's going on for 7.0, what work has been done, what work is ongoing, and what work will hopefully, what it will look like once we get to the 7.0 release. So yeah, so just to begin that, what I want to cover today is many of the changes in developer tooling for Liferay Portal 7.0. That includes specifically for tools for developers such as yourself, third-party developers, people that are building plugins and extensions for Liferay. Also want to show you guys some changes that are going on to IDE 3.0. So the latest release of Liferay IDE is 2.2.4, and that was released just a few weeks back to add some compatibility for Eclipse Mars. If you have any problem with that release, be sure and report issues on the forums or in Jira. We try to respond to those. But we've started, work is well underway for 3.0 for IDE, and that's going to be our release for IDE targeting Liferay Portal 7.0 that will be released hopefully right at the same time as Liferay 7.0. it might trail it just a week or two as we make sure all of the final kinks are ironed out. But we hope to have a milestone release of IDE 3.0 coming within a month or so, or hopefully before DevCon at the beginning of next month. That's our goal. So James, is the screen share coming through okay?
Yes, Greg, the screen share looks great. I see lots of little windows with big fonts, which is cool.
Oh, okay, good. So we'll see how this works. So I guess there's a couple directions we could start out with. One would be talking about IDE 3.0, but let's go ahead and start there. Now, the first thing that I would like to show you for, actually, the first concern I would like to talk about for you Liferay developers is, okay, I've got plugins for Liferay 6.2. What's going to happen in 7.0? If I'm a 6.2 developer, what do I need to know? What's the number one thing I need to know going into Liferay 7.0? And to answer that question, well, it's a loaded question. It kind of depends on what are you doing? How did you extend Liferay in 6.2? What are your plans for 7.0? But in general, I would say you need to read up on OSGi and Gradle. Those are going to be the two technologies that are going to be important going forward. That doesn't mean that all of your existing knowledge won't still be valid for 7.0. So let me just say for 6.2 developers, in 7.0, everything that you have been doing in 6.2 will continue to be available just as it always has. The Ant, the plugins SDK, service builder, it will still continue to work as you have come to know and love.
Does that include Maven as well?
That includes Maven as well. So so there is going to be compatibility layers throughout. There is going to be I won't say seamless, but there is going to be compatibility layers for everything. So even if under the covers there is new tooling that's actually doing the work, when you run the command, your commands will be the same. It will look and feel very similar. There is one exception to that, and I will cover that later on. And don't let me forget it, James, and that is the if you called a Liferay API with your plugin in 6.2, and that API has been modularized. In other words, it's been pulled out of Liferay core and it's now available as an OSGi module. Those will require some work. There will be some migration work required, absolutely required. The other types of migration, the other types of adopting new technology in 7.0 is totally up to your discretion. You can continue to build war style plugins the way you have. The exception is APIs that have already been externalized or modularized, and we'll talk about that process maybe later. Unfortunately, I don't have a demo for that, but we can talk about that and maybe come back and hit that later. Okay, and then so that kind of comes into the next big question is, what if I have a custom service builder plugin for 6.2? How do I call it from other plugins? We know how to do that in 6.2. In the 7.0 world, those things will still be possible because you can still build classic war style plugins for 7.0. That means that the way that you made custom service builder APIs available in plugins in 6.2, you can continue to do that in 7.0. That infrastructure for service builder portlets that are deployed as wars, where you share the service jar, that's still going to be available. None of that is going away. Now, if you want to do it in the new the new 7.0 modular way, in the OSGi way, there's going to be a completely different ball of wax, and we'll cover some of the resources we have available right now for developers. They can go ahead and get working on the new OSGi way for service builder.
Hey, Greg, before we leave the general topic of tooling, there was a question on IRC about Gradle, and why is it now the preferred build system, given that Maven was introduced, not that long ago, and now we're changing to something different. So what's the deal with Gradle? Why is it preferred?
Good question. So as everyone knows, historically, the preferred build tool chain has been Ant for Liferay core. Now, we know that Maven is much more widely used and adopted, and then now Gradle is becoming more and more common and prevalent. And so basically, there was the Liferay Maven plugin, which allowed Liferay developers to build Liferay plugins with Maven. That's going to continue to be there and be supported going into 7.0. But the core team was on Ant. The core team did not adopt Maven, but now they're kind of skipping over Maven and going right to Gradle, which, you know, to be honest, Maven and Gradle, they're built on the same similar concepts, and so they're going right from Ant to Gradle within Liferay Core. But let me back up a little bit. So there is a push for Gradle in Liferay Core. However, the push for 7.0 is not really pushing to Gradle or pushing to Maven or even getting rid of Ant. There's still plenty of Ant, like the 7.0 plugins SDK is still going to have Ant, still going to be, right now, I don't know if it's going to be, there'll still be the Ant layer in there throughout. So you still will have access to your Ant scripts that you've always used, even if underneath there's more Gradle, even if underneath there is other technologies behind it, Ant will still be available. So really the push is not to Gradle specifically. The push is to more modularized tools. Now let me give you an example. The way the plugins, the way Ant worked, the way Maven worked in the past for Liferay developers is all of the interesting bits, all of the workhorses were actually just available in Portal Impl, like Service Builder, Lang Builder, CSS Builder. All of these Portal tools were available only through Portal Impl, and either the Ant scripts or the Maven plugin were just trying to get your environment ready so that you could invoke these tools deep down inside Portal Impl jar. And so really what the push in 7.0 has been to liberate all of these tools that have been stored inside Portal Impl. So now if you go and look at our Maven Nexus repository, and I don't, let's see if I can pull up a link. Let's see, repository. Yeah, here we go. So if you pull up the Maven Nexus repository, if I was to show you this repository a year ago, or maybe prior to Liferay 7.0, it would only have around 8 artifacts. And now you can see it has some 500 artifacts. Okay, and many of these things in here are the builders. So service builder, source formatter, Lang builder. Let's see, there's also CSS builder. Okay, so this is the real push for 7.0. It's not a push to Gradle per se. It's not a push to Maven per se. It's a push to modularization of the Liferay code, taking that 120 megabyte jar war that we had in 6.2 and splitting that up and making it available as standalone modules that can be invoked from your build tool, Maven, Gradle, SBT, Scala build tool, Play framework, whatever your build tool chain, whatever your enterprise or your organization has adopted. No longer are you going to have to come do it our way. The plugins SDK is still going to be there, available for those people that have adopted that technology and are fine with that. But for those people that want to use Maven, in the past, we had the Liferay Maven plugin, which was kind of a catch-all. It kind of connected you to all of what was stored up deep inside of Portal Impl. Service Builder, Lang Builder, EXT Builder, EXT Deployer, all these things. But now those have all been pulled out into their own standalone modules that have their own versions and build lifecycle. So like if you click on CSS Builder, you know, now you see we have versions 1.0.7. So these tools are independent of their host Liferay versions. And so this gives you, you know, much more control. Let's say that you want to adopt a new version of Service Builder, but you don't want to adopt a new version of Lang Builder. Well, in the past, all you could do was just switch your dependency from Portal 6.2 to Portal 7.0, and you got all of the tools. Well, what if one of the tools has a bug in it? You were stuck, and now you can just adopt which tool, which version of which tool is working for you. So that's really the big story for 7.0. And so there is a push to Gradle within Liferay core itself. So if you've been following master, you'll see that there's many new modules under Liferay portal/modules, and that tree, there's about 520 of them now, is completely built with Gradle now. But we're not pushing that down onto third-party developers. If third-party developers still want to use Maven, or they can, or if they want to use Gradle, they can, and they can just adopt these tools, adopt these new tooling pieces piecemeal. And so a good example of that is the Blade repository. So let's go ahead and start talking about the Blade repository and what it is. And so basically, this was a project started by Ray Auger of Liferay fame. And when we were moving to 7.0, when we were moving to a more modularized runtime, we wanted to show how that was going to affect positively the developer environment and making the developer environment more modular. And that means we wanted to show developers some example projects of how they could build Liferay 7 modules, so plugins for Liferay 7 that use OSGi. If I say Liferay module, I'm really talking an OSGi bundle that performs some type of a plugin for Liferay. So we wanted to provide so many different examples that use different build tools, but then build these new Liferay 7 modules using these new modularized tools. So if I click on Maven, and then I click on a portlet, this is a declarative services portlet that is running inside of, actually this one doesn't use any third-party tools. This doesn't use any Liferay specific plugins. That just uses, that's another thing we'll talk about. Let's click on one that does. So service builder, service. And so here we can see that we declare our portal artifact dependencies just like normal. Then the difference here is the plugin declaration for service builder. So we see it has its own plugin declaration. It's not just Liferay Maven plugin and then you run the build service goal or the build service mojo. It actually has its own separate plugin definition and its own separate version. Here you can see here is the WSDD builder, similar. So if you wanted to do Lang builder, now you may say, hey, I was comfortable and familiar with Liferay-Maven-plugin. That is still going to be supported in 7.0, but just so you know, all that will be is underneath the covers that will call through to the actual discrete builders underneath it. So when you run, if you use Liferay Maven plugin and you say build service, it's actually going to be calling this plugin under the covers. So you can just continue to use Liferay-Maven plugin if you're happy with that, or if you don't like to use that plugin and you'd rather just concentrate on just individual tools that you need, just the single Liferay plugins you want, you can do it this way. So that's just an example of how the build environment is more modular. And there's also Gradle examples as well. So if we go back here to the Gradle tree under Blade, you can see here we show the same thing, calling the exact same plugin, calling the exact same service builder code, but it's invoked via Gradle.
Hey, Greg, is there anything in Gradle that's superior to any other system? What's so awesome about Gradle? And should I be moving to it myself?
It's a good question. So, you know, this gets people get quite opinionated, and I'll give you my opinion. And that is, to me, I see Gradle as a nice combination, a nice midway point between Ant and Maven. I mean, the great thing about Maven is convention over configuration and everything being standardized and everything being declarative and there being a real model behind your build environment. That's what POM means, is a project object model. So that means that your project has a real way to declare what it's doing, its inputs, its outputs, its dependencies. And this was a great boon for development because it allowed a rich ecosystem of plugins that could plug into that standard life cycle of a build, and it allowed other developers to come on and quickly understand, okay, I see what your build is doing. It also allowed developer tooling to be able to enhance the user's build environment, because it could tell exactly what this project was doing. And you didn't have to duplicate information. You didn't have to have like the Eclipse metadata and IntelliJ metadata. Both Eclipse and IntelliJ could simply read the POM and they knew what was going on. Whereas in an Ant system, they couldn't read the build scripts and figure out what was going on. You had to duplicate all of that environmental configuration. And the other thing great about Maven is that it standardized the notion of a artifact repository. It basically convinced the world that you must have these artifacts in a declarative way available somewhere else, not copied inside a lib folder inside your build environment. They need to be in a separate artifact repository. And so really, Gradle came in 5-6 years ago, and it really started playing in the house that Maven built, right? Because Maven had already convinced the world that you must have a standardized project model, you must have declarative build, and then you need these artifact repositories. So Gradle adopts all of those. The thing that I see Gradle bringing to the table is what a lot of people complain about Maven, is that it's slow, and or it's too hard to customize, but that's a design feature in Maven. Maven wants it to be hard to customize because plugins, that's the way, well, I won't get into all that, but it was a little too hard to customize. And the great thing about Ant is Ant's just like a scripting in XML. So you could just script up some new feature, some new behavior, and then run it. Gradle, I see, provides both of that. It's got the standardized structure, it's got the declarative build of Maven, but then it also has the scriptability and the imperative style build system that Ant did, bring it to Gradle. So you can simply just write some Gradle code that's just Groovy code that performs some part of your build if there's no plugin out there for it. So I see Gradle as just bringing the best of both worlds, the structured and the declarative format of Maven, along with the artifact repository, and the scriptability and the imperative style programming of Ant. So it's really just so that's why I think Gradle has gained so much traction and will continue to gain traction, is because it really is the best of both worlds, James. So sorry for the long answer.
So it's the Hannah Montana of build tools in Liferay.
That's right. So, and that's why Liferay is adopting it. But Liferay will continue to support Maven going forward for Maven developers. So, and Ant will continue to be supported at least for 7.0. I don't know the future for the Ant-based plugins SDK after 7.0. Yeah, so that's really the portal itself has been focusing on modularization, pulling out pieces of the core, bringing them as OSGi modules to run inside the Liferay the module framework. And then also there's been a big push to externalize and to separate these tools to make them much more piecemeal and much easier for external Liferay developers, such as most of the people listening, to be able to use these tools in their own build environment, whether it's Maven or Gradle or Scala build tool or whatever. They can call these, they can just plug in the Liferay Nexus repository into their build and then just invoke these tools, either use the existing plugin that we provided or build their own plugin, because most of the Liferay tools have a main method, so they can simply just be invoked. And so that's the story for there. And so for IDE, for Liferay IDE, for the Eclipse plugin, for our team, we decided we wanted to follow suit. We wanted to also make our tools more modular. We wanted to make, because not everyone is going to use Eclipse, not everyone is going to use Liferay IDE. So many of the features that we've added for Liferay IDE 3.0 will also be available as in a more modular standalone way. So this means we will be building many of these tools in such a way that they can be consumed from within Eclipse through the Liferay IDE plugin. They can also be used from the command line, from the build environment. So, and we'll demo some of that later today. So, James, if there's any more questions that you think I should answer about 7.0 in general before I get into the IDE 3.0 stuff, anything that you don't want me to talk about?
Yeah, actually, there's a question on IRC about the modularization effect or the modularization efforts in Liferay. I know you're not like the main guy for that, but
right.
The question is around upgrade, and this is the first question everyone's going to ask.
Yes.
Which is, you know, how do I get from 6.2 to 7 with this whole modularization thing? And we've talked about it before, but
yes.
It's good to reiterate.
No, it is. We can't really say this enough, and that is for most 6.2 developers. So let's say you have several plugins for 6.2. Most of the time, if you don't want to migrate, if you don't want to, okay, so there is going to be some migration required for API changes, and we'll cover that later. We actually are building a tool, a migration tool, to help you with this upgrading or this migrating of API. So there will be your standard API changes. So that's one migration. I'm not talking about like API changes. We're building a tool to help you this time from 6.2 to 7. I'm talking more of the architectural build system migration. So let's say in 6.2, I use the classic plugins SDK, and I built my war style plugin. And the question is, okay, going to 7.0, do I still want to continue to build war style plugins? So I'm making the distinction between a war style plugin, I call that the classic way, the Liferay plugins SDK or Maven, where the output of your Liferay plugin is a war. We'll call that war style. The new OSGi way, the new 7.0 way, one way that's going to be supported and favored more and more as we go in future Liferay releases, is the modular way, the OSGi bundle. So the output is a jar. And so if you're a 6.2 developer and you say, is it time for me to make that switch from war style to OSGi style, or the jar style, the modular style? And we will have some documentation to cover this. I imagine Rich and the guys over at dev.life will, and Jim will have a document. Should I convert? Should I migrate to the new 7.0 OSGi module? And there's a lot of questions we can ask. And I have my thoughts. We need to get more input from the community and also from Liferay core engineers themselves. But here's my thinking, guys. And so this is not coming from a core engineer. This is coming from the Eclipse plugin guy. But from what I can tell, if your 6.2 plugin, your war that you've built, let's say it's a portlet, is self-contained, it's completely enclosed, there's no parts of that war, there's no code in that war that need to be reused among other applications or other wars. In other words, it's just standalone. It's like a single unit. It's a big war, and that's your app. I see no compelling reason for you to need to upgrade at this time for 7.0. It probably would be good for you to get familiar with the new OSGi way, the new Liferay module way, because maybe in version 8, maybe in Liferay 9, the old war style way is completely gone. But for at least 2 versions, 7, 7.1, 7.2, all of the 7.x line, the war style way is not going away. So you don't have to migrate, or you don't have to convert to a new artifact, a new build architecture, a new architecture for 7.0. But if you want to, if you say, hey, I'm paying the price for the upgrade, let's go ahead and upgrade my build too. Okay, so when should you absolutely adopt the new approach? That's going to be, my thinking is, if there's anything inside your portlet, anything inside your traditional war style plugin that needs to be shared among other portlets, other applications, or even needs to be modularized itself, then you should go ahead and adopt the new Liferay 7 OSGi bundle approach. Because as you remember before, sharing code between Liferay portlets, between wars, it was fraught with error, right? And there was a lot of a lot of smoke and magic going on in the background to make you to be able to invoke a service builder API from one plugin to another. It did work, but it involved a lot of jar copying, and behind the scenes there was a lot of class loader magic, and so and there's issues with a lot of issues abounded there. And so if you have that type of situation, we feel that for 7.0 it's time for you to adopt the new the new OSGi approach. And then what build you use for that, you can use Ant, Maven, or Gradle. You can use all three, or any of the three, or there's actually another type of build tool chain that I hope I have time to demo. We may not have time, and that's B&D tools. That might be for another call, James. But I think that there's a really compelling way to build Liferay 7 modules using a plugin called B&D tools that's very opinionated, just as opinionated as the classic Liferay plugins SDK. But I feel like it makes you very productive building OSGi bundles. So so that's I hope that answered that question. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, actually, I had one more. You mentioned the modularization of the build tools themselves, like the CSS builder and service builder and other builders. And so now we're going to have, we're going to get into the classic DLL hell scenario. So how does, like in Liferay 7.1, for example, how do you know if you are at the compatible version of the builder plugin that you're using? Like, can you mix and match freely, or is there going to be constraints that will be checked so you can't screw up?
Yeah, you won't be able to mix and match freely. So yeah, that's a good concern. It's a good question, and because with that modularity comes some burden on maintaining what version is compatible with what, and what version will generate, especially for things like Lang Builder and CSS Builder. It's not as bad. For things like Service Builder, it's going to be pretty important to know, okay, this version of Service Builder will generate code that works on these versions of Liferay. And so we'll simply have to just improve our documentation there so developers know it's going to work. Or they could stick with a tool like Liferay-Maven-plugin, that kind of umbrella Liferay Maven plugin, and it's going to manage the versions underneath for you. So as long as you're just using the released version of Liferay Maven plugin to build to run your commands, to run your build commands, it's going to be maintaining those versions. So yeah, if the user breaks it out and calls each individual tool separately, they will be responsible for knowing which version works.
Right, and is that because when you run the build tools to build your project, you're not actually running in an OSGi container? There's
no, it's just a simple Java main.
Yeah. So it's like there's no way to do the semantic version checking or the dependency management that OSGi brings, because you're not in an OSGi runtime.
Yeah, there's no way. It's kind of just invoking it, and I hope that it's going to do the correct thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of the background, the kind of story in general of what's going on for 7.0. And we ready to show a few things, James? Is there anything else?
Yeah, actually, there's one more question about when does the IntelliJ version of Liferay IDE come out?
The IntelliJ version of Liferay IDE. Good question. So right now there is, like I say, no plans. If there was, there are no plans for an IntelliJ version of the IDE, mainly because we don't have an IntelliJ plugin expert in-house like we do Eclipse. So if we had to, but Liferay, we hired an expert Gradle plugin writer, and so that's why we went from 0 Gradle plugins to about a dozen or maybe 2 dozen Gradle plugins now. If you look in our Nexus repository, we have, let's do a search here. Nope, not this one. So all the Gradle plugins now. So it's just a matter of finding the right person, but I don't want to make any promises that we're going to find such a person. It's hard enough to find Eclipse plugin authors, and IntelliJ plugin authors are a even more rare bird. Usually, IntelliJ, the pattern is some guys from JetBrains write the plugin. You know.
Yeah, and I think the good news there is that you can still use IntelliJ with Liferay 7. I mean, there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah, it's only going to be easier. That's right. It's only going to be easier because the build tools, the build system is more modular. It's going to be more and more towards Gradle, and IntelliJ has a really good Gradle support. So the good news is it's going to get better. And so I'm going to be demoing some Gradle support in Eclipse. So right now the Gradle guys, Gradleware, they've started a new top level Eclipse. I don't use IntelliJ, but I hear that the Gradle support is well done. But the Gradle support in Eclipse was done by Spring Source, or what's Spring Pivotal maybe. But so if anyone's used the Gradle plugin for Eclipse done by Spring, that one's is now deprecated and is being end of life, and the new plugin is called Build Ship, and I've been using it and been using it to build. I've been using it lately to build Liferay 7 modules using Gradle, and it works quite well. So I think for the Liferay plugin developer for 7.0, both IntelliJ and Eclipse users are going to be happy. And then so there are no plans for a Liferay IDE style plugin for IntelliJ at this time. Sorry, we have to keep saying no. We just don't have.
There's a lot of people, including myself, that use it successfully with like the Maven support is really good.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I really think that the story for it goes back to why we're adopting. One of the reasons why Liferay is adopting technology such as OSGi, in that there are really good tools out there, both Eclipse plugins for building OSGi bundles. It's a standard technology. There's a spec for it, and so Liferay doesn't have to go and spend that much time building such a specific IDE, Liferay IDE, as it were, to be able for developers to be productive. Now, yeah, so that's right, James. You can be quite productive building Liferay 7 modules with Maven or with Gradle using both Eclipse and IntelliJ.
And NetBeans.
And NetBeans, yeah, I heard their Gradle and Maven support is good as well. So, yeah, any other questions?
Nope, I don't see any more.
Okay, so hopefully, so should I start doing Liferay IDE stuff, or do you think we have enough IntelliJ users? I should show some of the command line stuff, or James?
Yeah, let's start with the command line. That'd be good. Just a couple, and then we can kind of move up the stack and get to IDE.
Okay. Yeah. So one example, just one of the examples of some of the build tool modularization stuff one we've already shown. You can see that here in the Blade repository. So we have many different example Liferay 7 modules using Gradle, and we also have, and really the most interesting ones are going to be your JSP portlets, and then also the service builder bundles. So this just basically these 4 bundles just take the sample service builder portlet that's in Liferay plugins, that's in the Liferay plugins repository. There's that sample service builder portlet. This Blade example just takes that portlet and shows how to do it as a set of OSGi bundles, where you have your API bundle, which is your old my portlet -service jar. Basically, everything was in there, and then you have your service bundle, and this is all of your impl, all of your implementation, like your local service impl and your remote impl, and then the test bundle is where you might put your any test, any integration test, or any other type of test you want to do. You want to test out the services You could add that to a test bundle. You don't have to have that one. That's just here as an example. Basically, that's there because we were trying to test these services ourselves when we were getting it to work. And then you have the web bundle, which is your JSP that does your CRUD pages. So that's Blade, and people can take that, can download it, can build it. Of course, you got to use Maven for all of the Maven ones, and then so let's actually show that a little bit. Would that be useful, James?
Yeah, I think it would be useful, and it would be useful to describe the output. Like in the past with service builder plugins, the output is basically a WAR file, and then inside there is like a jar file that you would like copy to your global class path, which is wrong, and it's like, what's the new output, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. So I'm in the Blade repository here, and so let me go ahead, and I have actually started. Okay, let's see. Okay, so here I've actually started Liferay 7 from within IDE, but I want to stop this because we'll just do it command line for right now. Let me go to I want to start up Liferay 7. So this is just master. I built it a few days ago. And once it gets going, we will deploy some Liferay 7. Okay, so if you're using 6.2 where you build a WAR, for 7.0, it's going to be the same thing. You just run, you have your SDK set up, and you run ant WAR. It builds the WAR. You copy it to the deploy folder. None of that's changing. Now, what I'm going to be showing here is specifically let's say I'm going to build a new Liferay 7 OSGi style or a bundle style plugin. How does that work, and what are the mechanics, and what are some of the tools I can use for that? And so that's what I'm going to show here. So let's just go into the Blade repository. You want to do Maven or Gradle, James? Which one?
Let's go with Maven.
Okay. So here we have. I'm sorry, this is not too many. We want this folder to have 100 in here, and some real world ones like JSF and things like that. But it's just not quite there yet. We just need to spend some more time. Pull requests are welcome. If anyone has a new 7.0 integration point that can be nicely succinct and packaged as a single module, it'd be great to add that in here. But let's just take the Blade. Sorry, the portlet. So this is a new declarative services portlet. So let me show this in. Let's see. Do I have this somewhere? No, that's Gradle. No, that's B&D tools. Sorry, I have so many Eclipse things open here. Here we go. Here it is. Okay, so this is Eclipse, but it's just easier to show it this way. So let me go ahead and import this project. So if you're using the, I don't know how it works in IntelliJ, but in Eclipse, you simply just point to the Blade repository under the Maven folder, and you can see it has all the projects to import. We'll simply import the portlet declarative services. Okay, so we see here that that this declarative service bundle is really simple. It's declarative service portlet. It's really simple. It just has two dependencies, OSGi, because we're going to be building an OSGi declarative service component, and then the portlet API. So let's look at our actual portlet. And before, portlets were declared, in a WAR style, and there was a portlet XML, and then you had to define your portlet tag or your portlet element in the XML file and the Liferay portlet XML and all that. That's the standard way. So now in Liferay 7, we can use something called OSGi declarative services. So it's just like Spring, it's similar to Spring Beans and how you would just annotate a Spring Bean in your Spring XML file, but now you can do it all with annotations at build time, and these annotations don't even exist at runtime. They're simply build time annotations. And so here we can see that we have a new class that is going to be a portlet class, and we declare the component that it's going to be of service, a portlet service. I think Ray O'Jays covered a lot of this in previous dev.life, but let me just cover the build, how you actually build these things. So here I would go to that directory. I would just simply run save and clean package. Okay, and the output is a jar file, not a WAR file. Now, there's something a little different about this jar file that makes it different from WARs in the past. So let's actually take a look at that. So if I open up this jar file, we can see that the manifest looks a little different. It's got a few more things in there than a normal jar. So if anyone is familiar with OSGi, they know what a lot of this means. And this is what declares this bundle and how it's going to interact with Liferay 7 once you deploy it to the runtime. And this declares what the name of the bundle is going to be, the export and import packages, and also what its requirements. And also it has this little tag, which is very important, because this is what tells the Liferay runtime, the services runtime in OSGi. It tells what components am I declaring as a part of this bundle that you need to add to the system. So in Liferay, and so you can see here we have that. Don't worry about this. This is all generated by the build tool. And what is that build tool? So you can see that this project is just a simple source main Java with a single class. That's all there is in it. So how did all the other stuff get built? Well, in the POM file, you see that we invoke this plugin in Maven. So there's two plugins in Maven that you can use. It's not as simple as jarring these things up. You don't want to hand write the manifest at all in the OSGi world. You need the manifest generated by a tool, because a tool can do it much more precisely and much more robustly than a human can. And so this tool, this Maven plugin is what actually takes your code, and then during the package time, you can see that the packaging type is bundle, so it's not jar. And so this code will, during the build, after it's compiled everything, when it goes to create the jar, it'll actually invoke a tool called dev.life under the covers to actually build the jar. And it will insert all of the necessary metadata that you need into the jar. And so once we have this, now this jar is ready to be deployed into Liferay 7. Okay, and there's many ways that we can deploy this jar into Liferay 7. I want to show you a few of those.
Hey, Greg, before you go there, there's a couple of questions about what you just did.
Yeah.
The first one is about the portlet spec, portlet 3, which is not done yet, but it in the one of the annotations there, or one of the generated ones, it declared right there that it won't work with portlet spec 3. It says 2.
That's right. This is simply, this is being, to be honest, when we wrote this thing in here, we were getting it to work, and we weren't being too mindful of our versions here. Absolutely, you could likely do this right here, like that, or just say 3.0, because really, you know, everything here is going to work fine in 3.0 as well. I mean, the portlet spec is going to be backwards compatible. So this is just being pedantic for no reason.
Okay, and this is a file, though, that Liferay developers are going to have to write, this private package, import package, which will be need to be documented. Yes, and there's actually two. Personally, I don't like using this plugin. I mean, I don't. That's too strong. It's a fine plugin, but there's a new plugin. So what? This is an Apache project, the Maven Bundle plugin, and it calls under the covers a library called dev.life. This is written by the architects of OSGi itself, and so and it's really the linchpin of all of the OSGi developer tools
It's what didn't exist 5 years ago. It's why, you know, the Spring framework and OSGi had such a messy parting, is because at the time that Spring was trying to do, the Spring team for Spring framework was trying to OSGiify, these tools were not really available and were not as robust as they are today. So really BND Live is the workhorse behind all building your bundles. And whether you're using the Gradle plugin for building bundles or the Maven plugin for building bundles, it eventually always calls a library called BND Live, which is just short for bundle library. And there's another plugin. Let me show you it here. In Blade, we actually do both. So here, I'm not calling Maven bundle plugin. I'm calling BND Maven plugin. And the main difference between these two is BND Maven plugin is written by the team that writes all the OSGi specs. This is what they use internally. And also, it has this nice little separate config file that's not encoded in the POM and not all gnarly with the XMLified metadata like import package and stuff. It actually is a nice little file like this. And it doesn't look, I mean, it looks a little terse right now. A lot of this stuff can be deleted, it can be removed, like DS annotations doesn't need to be in there anymore. But this one, to me, is a little easier to work with. There's an editor for it, you know, so I can actually make changes to it with an editor, or I can just do it by source. And this one, to me, is a little easier to see what's going on.
It seems like it separates the OSGi bit from the Maven plugin bit.
It's exactly right. Yeah, it separates it out. And this plugin assumes that there will be a file in your project at the root level called bnd.bnd. And that just means, okay, when I'm about to build the bundle, what instructions do you want to give me? Like what, you know, so when I'm putting the bundle together, what instructions do you need to give? Now there's pros and cons here. The pros of the other plugin is that this is just straight Maven stuff. It's just straight XML, so it can take advantage of all of the parenting and all of the the effective POM stuff, profiles and all that thing. So this can take advantage of all of the powerful Maven configuration you have. Whereas the other plugin is a little bit more BND centric. In other words, it's just expecting to look for the files in this single bundle, and so you can't really share things as easily. So you might, if you take the separate BND file approach, you might be repeating configuration a little bit.
Is it possible to like do it the best of both worlds again, where in the Maven POM you can somehow import the bnd.bnd file instead of having declarations in mind?
There are ways. Right, because Maven profiles and properties. Maven profiles are just properties at the end of the day. So those properties can be passed into the BND file. So you can't, in the BND file itself, it has many, it can expand many things. It can expand properties. So like in your parent Maven configuration, you could standardize on some things, set them as properties in a profile or whatever, and then they would be passed into the BND file itself, and you could expand variables this way. So yes, you could do the best of both worlds.
Okay, and then one other question on the source code to that portlet, the component annotations.
Yeah.
Autocomplete, is that possible? I'm assuming it is because it's Java and annotations are just Java classes. Yeah.
Yes. So let's see. So at one point, yes. So we have there's a branch of Liferay IDE where we have autocomplete in here. I don't have it. I don't have it running right now. But there is work for that, yes. So that when you're building, we're going to do many things in Liferay. We have many things planned. One is generating these components from your existing portlets. So we plan a tool that will help you convert from a. I think of the JSF team. They have hundreds of wars that they put together in their showcase and in their demo package. And the idea of converting all of those over to OSGi components, just they couldn't imagine doing it by hand. So we do have a tool plan that will manually read your classic MVC portlet code and then generate the new annotations that you have in your portlet XML. We also plan for code assist here in the and wizards, so that when you're generating a new OSGi component, it will generate a lot of these tags for you. Now, most of the component tags you'll write for Liferay 7 won't be this complex, where you have all of the extra properties you need to set. Most of them are simply add component, what service, and really the service you don't even need to, well, I won't go into that. So they'll be simpler than this. If you look in the other components, let's say like, look at so here, this component is simply, it's a polar processor, and then you just simply say, okay, which portlet am I going to poll? Let me see another one. Here's the indexer. Yeah, so it's just a single property, you know, that you're setting which indexer do you want to post-process. So many of them are a little simpler than the, but still you're going to need to know, okay, what is the property for this exactly again? And that'll be covered in documentation, and it will be covered in tooling. I don't know if that'll be in Liferay IDE 3.0 or it might be in 3.1, but we do have plans for that, because there's no reason why we don't, because we can support that. So
yeah, one thing that just came to mind also, I believe the Portlet 3 spec leads are including support for annotations similar to what you have here for OSGi componentry.
mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what that's going to look like. But the Portlet 3 spec is not done yet, so we can only speculate. But
right,
I'm wondering if, like in the other Portlet class that you have with the component annotation,
mm-hmm.
in the Portlet 3 world, would you have to have another annotation with duplicate content, like the?
It depends on who's going to bring your portlet to bear, right? So when you have a portlet class, you know, you need to present this to the Liferay. You need to present this to the runtime and say, I have a new portlet, and it really all depends on who is going to realize your portlet at runtime. If the Java EE7 container, if the portlet container 3.0 container in Liferay is going to realize your portlet, then you'll need to use portlet 3.0 annotations, because it's going to have an annotation processor that's going to realize portlets in that container.
Yeah.
If you want OSGi, if you want the OSGi subsystem, the OSGi module framework to realize your portlet, by realize I mean bring it into the system and make it available to the rest of the software operating inside Liferay portal, then you would need to use OSGi components. So it really would be, you would have your pick, right? Just like now you can realize your portlet with XML. That's the classic approach. Now we're giving a new way to realize your components, or you realize your portlet via OSGi services. And so, yeah, you know, Liferay 8 that's on portlet 3.0, or Liferay 7.1 that's portlet 3.0, then yeah, you would have a third way. The classic way, XML, the OSGi way, OSGi services, and then the portlet 3.0 way. So
yeah, and I imagine if you're deploying to Liferay, it's Liferay's annotation processor and Liferay's portlet container that will be taught about portlet 3, and so it will be able to process those. And maybe these two properties, like the Java X.portlet properties you have here, they might move into a different thing, or who knows what. But
exactly right. They would likely be an annotation property directly on the portlet annotation with a display name equals, yeah, it would probably something like that. Yeah, exactly. So it would be a little, you know, but now you might say this, you know, why would I want to take the trouble of doing building this portlet as a OSGi service? And really, you just need to go more into what makes OSGi useful and beneficial, and why would I want to? Because this is quite a bit of code, right? I mean, that's a non. I mean, it's one file, but this chunk of annotation is non-trivial, right? You got to there's quite a few moving parts there. And why would I take the time to learn this and do this? Well, it really, once you get a feel for how things work in OSGi, once you get a feel for the service runtime and how things are dynamic and robust, and things can come and go, and can be, you can build your software to be resilient to changes, to the dynamism that happens in most runtimes. I feel that a lot of developers will find it worth the cost. So so let's go ahead. Any more questions, James, before we actually deploy this thing?
Nope, no more.
Okay, so Liferay 7 is running, and let's just kick this thing around a little bit. So okay, so Liferay 7 is running, and it comes with it an OSGi shell. So I can telnet to port 11311, and this is the GoGo shell that's running inside of Liferay 7. And so there's a lot of commands I can run, and you can peruse those, and you can look at the different commands. But an interesting one right off the bat is list bundles and LB, and we'll say -S for symbolic. And we can see that there's over 323 different bundles running inside of Liferay 7. And a lot of this was covered in Ray's talk explaining about the life cycle. I won't go into the OSGi life cycle unless people on the call want me to. Won't go into the OSGi life cycle of how bundles get installed and started and all that. We'll just show it.
If you want more details for that, be sure to visit us at the DevCon next month in Germany.
Yeah, there's really a lot more shown. So here, let's go ahead and deploy this bundle to Liferay 7. And there's many ways to do this. One way would be copy it to the auto deploy folder. That's supported. Another way is that you can just install it directly from the GoGo shell. Actually, I think space is in the path. So now we can see that my bundle is installed, but it's not started. Okay, so now I have the portlet in there, and then if I went to Liferay 7, see if I can do this. And I apologize, I built master the other day, so likely much of this won't work. So I'm going to stay away from Liferay 7, the UI, because it changes every time I build, and so I don't know it's going to be coming or going. Let's see if I can add that. There's the portlet, by the way. You can see it there. Okay, so that worked. And then I can come in here and change this to calling an OSGi service. Let's see if we can do that. Oops. So I need to some of the on-the-fly hackery I talked about, James. This could blow up. I need to add a new API so that I can use this handy call. So this is how I would call a service in the OSGi world. So I want to, let's say I want to call the user local service. That sounds interesting. So let's go to, I'm going to have to cheat a little bit and look up something really quickly. We'll go into the any of these other ones. copy my portal dependency. Now I can call portal service calls.
I noticed you didn't put a version in there.
Well, the version's managed, good question. The version is managed by the parent POM.
Okay.
So if we look in the blade.maven parent, this is the parent here, James. Then we have the Liferay version set here. See, originally when we did Blade, we wanted each bundle, each project folder to be completely standalone, separate. They could just copy that to their USB disk and run the build. But that got to be a little too much maintenance burden. So we introduced a single level parent. And so we have a little bit of magic in the parent here. So, okay, so now.
Is that going to be part of the standard archetype for Liferay 7?
So the Liferay 7 archetype for OSGi, there will be no parent. It will generate everything in the POM that it needs.
Okay.
So users can copy and paste to their own parents. Okay, so now that I have user local service, I want to, from an OSGi declarative, OSGi component, I just want to say get service reference. User local service. Now, there's a little more plumbing involved within OSGi because reference is like a pointer to a service, because the service can come and go, and it's a little more dynamic than just a straight static call. So, and a lot of this code can be done with annotations. I could simply say @reference user local service, but I'm not doing that right now. I just want to show a little more of the plumbing. Okay, so there's the 3 lines to give me my my local service. And really, you know, I wouldn't have to have that. This could be made a lot simpler, but this is just for demonstrations only. So now I can say user service. Now I can say okay, so do that, rerun. Rebuild the bundle, and now I need to reinstall in Liferay. So, you know, I can simply install a new one, uninstall. There's a lot of different things you can do, but no one works from the go-go shell here. So, actually, I'm going to show you another way that you can deploy using Liferay 7. So, inside Liferay IDE for 3.0, you're going to be able to, just like you were able to with, for 6.2 war style plugins, you're going to be able to right-click the server and drag and drop and be able to add this like normal, add it as a module to deploy to the server, and that's going to automatically deploy and keep everything in sync for you, so you don't have to manually deploy from the command line. Now here's the difference between IDE 2.0 and IDE 3.0. In 2.0, we had that feature, drag and drop deployment, and automatically syncing it just so you code as you code your changes, it's automatically publishing in the background to keep it up to date on Liferay. In 2.0, this was only available in the Eclipse plugin. We did not have that feature available any other way from IntelliJ or any other place. So starting in 3.0, we said okay, we want to make this feature available in IDE 3.0, but we also want to make this available in a more modular way. So we actually have pulled out the deployment. Now, one way you could deploy that is simply copy it to the auto deploy folder. But we wanted a little bit more, in the IDE team, we wanted a little bit more rich deployment story. Basically, we wanted to be able to deploy with the full life cycle, update, restart, install, whatever's actually needed to get your code deployed, and then also get some feedback. Okay, why didn't that deploy? As you know, OSGi bundles in 7, it's not just to drop it in there and then hope everything works from the classic way. In OSGi, there's actually a life cycle for a bundle. It gets installed, it's started, it resolves dependencies, it resolves the environment, it binds to the different imports and exports. And so if we could build a better deployment API and make it available to developers, then this would be much better for developers. So actually, Liferay 7 has a JMX-based deployer API for the OSGi bundles. So you can actually deploy OSGi bundles via JMX, and this will work for any Liferay server. And what's great about this is that in the past, we had to rely on the app server, WebSphere, Tomcat, JBoss, Glassfish, for any kind of hot deployment, auto deployment, redeployments. Now with Liferay 7, we have, if you're doing OSGi bundles, we have our own deployment API, our own deployment lifecycle, and we're just piggybacking on top of what OSGi provides us. We didn't go invent a bunch of things. We're just basically using what's already in OSGi, in the OSGi spec, and we're just building some tools that make that more available, easier for you to consume. And one way is going to be from within the IDE. The IDE, instead of doing its own thing like it would in the past, it's actually using the OSGi standard deployment mechanisms in the background. But we can also do that from the command line. So there's this tool called Blade. So kind of piggybacking off of the Blade name, we have developed a tool called Blade. It's just a command line program called Blade, and it's just a Java app, and you can install it on your system, and it will actually use these new deployment APIs. So now let's look at our rebuilt jar, the one that calls the OSGi service, and let's take one quick look before we look at that. Let's actually, now that I have those services, now that I'm calling user local service, we need to make sure that our imports are going to be correct. See, this is actually not going to work, isn't it? Because look, we're not. Let's actually show it failing. This would be a good demonstration. So let's try to deploy that using the tool. Now I could simply use the GoGo shell. I could use the IDE. Both would work, but let's use this new Blade tool to deploy it. And the reason I didn't have to give it a port, or the reason I didn't have to give it a path, is what this tool is doing is it's simply connecting to the local Liferay instance and server, and okay, it actually deployed. I thought that it would fail. Okay, so
did you actually compile it after you made that change?
Oh, I think I did. Take a look. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, here we go. So we didn't actually declare to OSGi that we needed this class, and so it actually failed. So let me go here in the POM. And you may say, "Oh my goodness, that's really a lot of work that I have to manage all of these imports. Well, actually, there's a great way to do that automatically, and then you simply just say star, and that tells dev.life to go through all of my class files and actually look into every one of the classes and see what they import, and then dynamically generate the import statements. So that's what the star does. Before, I just said only import these two, and so I wasn't able to access those other APIs like user local service or the OSGi service over OSGi API. So now with the star, now let me rebuild it. So now let's look at our imports. You see, it actually imports, get a little bigger. It actually imports OSGi framework, and it imports COM portal service, COM Liferay portal service. Now let's simply redeploy, I'll deploy again, and it will perform, actually it'll perform an update as opposed to an install, because the Blade tool will check to see, oh, I already have that bundle installed, so I'll just update. You see the number didn't change. It's still bundle 325. Okay, so that worked. And there's also a way that you can tell Blade to actually watch that bundle, and as soon as changes are made to the bundle, it will redeploy. So
that's actually a question on IRC is for doing fast deployment, or edit, deploy, test. How quickly can we make that, like JRebel type activity?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways we can do that. So one way is going to be in the IDE. Let me actually put down the server here. So there's many options for JRebel style development. So one is going to be to use Liferay IDE and use the Maven plugin and simply deploy it to the server. So let me start up. Did that finish? Yeah, shut down. Okay. Let me start. So we'll start the portal again here, and then we'll simply deploy that OSGi bundle using Maven to the server. And what? Go ahead.
Does the JMX thing that you mentioned earlier, does that work on remote servers as well?
Yes, but the caveat is no. So JMX is neutral, right? You can JMX to the moon. Yeah. The problem is to install using JMX the bundle, the Liferay 7 runtime needs to be able to read, the OSGi runtime needs to be able to read the bundle from a URL. So if you do it over to like a remote server, like the cloud or something, you would need to give it some URL that it could read. And if you're, on your local machine and that's where the bundle is, so we don't really have a way yet to upload the bundle to a remote location.
I imagine the remote plugin for IDE could potentially be that.
Yes, that would be a natural extension of that. Right now, the remote plugin supports that uploading of a WAR and then deploy locally. We could simply extend that to say upload a jar and then install into the runtime locally. Absolutely. We don't have work in progress yet for a remote deploy, but absolutely it would not be a stretch to get there. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this would work from using IDE 3.0 in Maven, and then I'd like to show what I think is the best environment for doing OSGi bundles, and that's using B&D tools. And I'll show that maybe, James, we only have about another 10 minutes?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
It is
We'll have to
recorded, so if there's something
schedule
really important you want to show, then we can show it, and then people can.
Okay, so while this is going on, let me show you something just to give you a taste, because I want to come back and do a much longer talk on this, James, but I don't have time to show it right now. Just want to show, give a taste of it. Let me start this. The portal started, and we can just simply say, drag and drop, the same thing, and it's going to publish Blade to the server. And then let's go ahead and open this up here, and sorry, go away. Oh no, where'd you go? New Windows. Okay, so we can see that, you know, I have my DS, my portlet here. Let's Liferay. And then I will hit save, and then we'll run in the background. And then it's set up to automatically republish, you know, every few seconds. So it's not as fast as JRebel, where you hit save, but it will republish in the background every few seconds after you've made changes, and then we should see the changes there. So that's a few seconds later. But actually, another thing I want to show, if we have time, don't have time, is I'm going to show B&D tools. I have time for one thing, either to show the JRebel like stuff with B&D tools, or to show the new migration tool. What do you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think we should do both.
Okay, so let's do the B&D tools first. So this is an environment called B&D tools, which is basically a highly customized Gradle build chain that just delegates everything to B&D Lab to build your bundles. And it's very opinionated about the structure and how the modules should be laid out. But if you go with the way it tries to organize the workspace, it really is second to none as far as productivity for building your bundles. And I'm going to actually show that. So here's the same Blade bundle, but we'll actually do a different one. We'll just do OSGi one here. Yeah. Now, the only difference here is to run the B&D tools, you actually have to have a special OSGi bundle installed. So there's one called an agent. You actually have to have an agent running in Liferay 7 that will listen for the B&D tools plugin to connect to it so that it can install, restart, update bundles live as you're coding them. So let's actually install the agent. So you can download this. We'll have documentation that'll cover all of this. So don't worry about not remembering these steps. But we need to quickly deploy agent. Where did it go? Oh, I know where it is. Okay, so there is something called the remote agent. And there's ways to have this automatically installed. I'm actually going to lobby it. It's just available as a download from Liferay. You don't want it in there by default because it opens up people's Liferays to anyone who connects to just install bundles randomly. But for developers, we want to make this available. So there was an error. Okay, so no remote agent this one, James. We'll have to do that another one. Let's show the migration tool. Okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so back to 6.2. Let's say that I have a 6.2 plugin and I need to migrate it to 7.0. Now, there's different ways when we say migrate. You're going to have to, at the very least, migrate the APIs. Or you're going to have to migrate from legacy services that are now OSGi modules. So those are going to be required. So let's say that there's a change in user local service. There's a new argument in one of the methods. That's absolutely going to have to be migrated, even if you stay with the war style traditional plugin or classic plugin. There's also another kind of migration that says, let's say I called the wiki service in 6.2. Well, now the wiki service is an OSGi module. So there's a process you're going to have to follow, which we will have documented, and we're going to have a tool to help you. You're going to have to convert. You can no longer call wiki local util or wiki util anymore, because now that's going to be available. That's not in core anymore. That's an OSGi module. But there is a standard process for updating your war style plugin to include the dependency. It's pretty simple. You just include the dependency in Maven or Ivy if you're using Ant, or Maven if you're using Maven, and then that just gets bundled with your war, and then you just call it like you always did. So they won't be using OSGi. There's just another compatibility layer we've added there. Then there's another kind of migration that says, okay, I'm not just migrating APIs. I'm actually going to now adopt the new Liferay 7 modular approach and convert to OSGi. That's kind of a separate migration. That's really more, I call that conversion. You're converting from war style to jar style to OSGi style. So we'll also have a tool that's going to help you with that. And just to give you a flavor of what that's going to be like, here is my 6.2 style war style portlet. This is just knowledge base portlet 6.2.x. And let's say I want to migrate this to 7.0. What am I going to need to do? How am I going to need to know? Well, I'll know one thing is by how does it not compile? There's APIs. But we wanted to go beyond that. We didn't want to just have a bunch of red markers in your Eclipse view and you say, oh, okay, well, these are errors, but how do I fix them? Well, what's great is we now have this great little document called Breaking Changes for 7.0. Let's see, if you go Liferay portal. You should go to Liferay portal and master. There's this great thing. What is it called?
T. Just press T.
T?
Yeah, it allows you to find files. Scroll up to the top.
Yeah,
Just
T.
hit T, and then just type breaking. There it is.
Nice. Thanks, James. You learned me something today. Okay, so in here is about 60 or 70 breaking changes that we have documented. It's like, okay, there used to be this tag, now it's changed to this. It used to be this way of doing the old way, and here's the new way. It's really great stuff. So, you know, we removed these methods from portlet config, but here's the new method. So here's the old call, here's the new call. Okay, so we have this for maybe about 70 of these. Now this is great, but what we wrote is we wrote a tool, a migration tool that will actually analyze your code and see if you are breaking, if you're using any of these breaking changes. We'll actually annotate them right there in your IDE. Now in the past, we would have written this as just a only available in the IDE, but in the new spirit of modularity, we have actually written this as a standalone tool as well. So I have this little project. There's my 6.2 example portlet. So I can use the blade tool and say migrate, and it'll actually analyze all of the JSPs and Java files that are in my project, and will show me everywhere there's breaking changes. And let's let that finish and show you. And right now we just have support for the breaking changes. We're going to also add support for when you're making calls to legacy things that are no longer available. So like if you've made a call to the wiki API and it's now available as an OSGi module. We'll also annotate those and then document where you need to what you need to change. You can see that we found, okay, there's asset render API changes. You're making a call in this Java file. Here's the line, and then this is only so much info, but we've also made the same tool available here. So you click on a project and you say migrate project. Oh, no. Let me try. Oh, I forgot to install the bundles. Sorry about that. I want to show this one thing, James, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
Bring up that one. Position. Okay, here we go. You have to excuse all we have it available is just a command. There's no like menu or anything because this project, this thing is still work in progress. But eventually you'll be able to select the project and then just say, okay, I want to run a migration task on this. And so it'll go through and it'll analyze the exact same files just like the command line one did. And it's going to be finding the problems in your plugin, and then it's going to add markers wherever any problems that it found. And it's going to show you the line and the actual API call. So we can see it found 10 problems, and it's the same thing. Okay, asset renderer, okay, KB article is using, and we can see here it's got changes, and it actually shows you, it actually highlights the API. And so the idea is that, but this is still not too useful, okay, because it's telling me, okay, this is wrong, but how do I know how to fix this? And this is where we've got a new view called Liferay Plugin Migration. And here we can see that when I ran the migrate task, now this is all work in progress. This is like right in the middle of development, so it looks really ugly, and it's not going to what it's going to look like in its final form. But this is just giving an idea, is that I ran that migration task. I analyzed and found these 10 problems with my code. Now I want to pull up this view and actually look at those same 10 problems in this type of view. But here I can see, okay, well, there's a problem with portal.properties. What's the problem? Oh, it's because here's a description. We removed portal properties used to display sections and form navigators. And so you can actually double click that and open, and it's going to highlight and say, yeah, this property is no good anymore. It's highlighting and showing you the breaking change. But here, if I look in this view and I look at the same thing, I can actually get the detail. So I can click the link to the LPS ticket. Then I can click this link, and it'll actually open me directly to this page here where the actual breaking changes, and you can search and see what's the old code, what's the new code. So that's what this view is going to do. And then I can also do the same thing for the files. It's highlighting that, saying the problem there. It's saying that there's a new init parameter default value change. Or indexer, it's saying, okay, this method has been changed. But here, if I click on this in the migration view, it'll actually tell me, oh, the indexer API was changed to include portlet request and portlet response parameters. Gives you the tickets, and then you can click this to show the full breaking change. Now, a lot of these changes you're going to have to manually change. So the idea behind this view is it's kind of like a to-do list. So the way it works is you have your 6.2 plugin, and you're not changing WAR style. You're going to stay with plugins SDK. You're going to stay with a WAR, but you're still going to have to make these changes to get to work in 7.0. And so what this view is going to do is going to walk you through some of the changes you need to make. And it's going to give you a way to track your changes. So the idea is this file has a problem. This is a change I need to make. And once I've made the change, so there's two things. One, I might be able to, the migration tool might be able to do this automatically for you, because some of the changes are simple. It's just changing an old API name to a new one, nothing else changes. It's simply a search and replace. Or it's changing a import from an old package to a new package. Simply we've moved packages, that's all that's changed. So some of those types of changes we're going to be able to do automatically for you. So if that change can be done automatically, then there's going to be this just auto migrate. Just go ahead and automatically do it for me. Or I might need to make the changes myself. And so what I can do is, once I've done the change, once I've updated to the new API, I can come in here and click the mark done button, and then it will be removed from this view. So the idea is that when you start your migration task, maybe there's 15 things you need to change in your plugin. New APIs, new types of changes that have been made in Liferay 7. And then it's going to give you the detail on the right. It's going to automatically change it for you if it can. And if not, it's going to give you all the code that you need in the breaking changes document link to be able to make the change. And then once you're done, then you simply say done. It'll be removed from this view, and now you only have 14 things you need to do. And the idea is you just keep working through these tasks until you are till you're finished. And this will persist. So the idea is that if you have a lot of migration to do, this view will remember your changes, and you know, if you restart the next day or later on, it will remember, okay, I've migrated 5 of my breaking changes. I still have another 10 to go. And it's also will do the so it's going to focus on migration at first, and then hopefully by 7.1 or maybe sometime in the 7.0 timeline, we can have a new version, sort of a conversion assistant that will help you convert from the classic style, the war style, to OSGi style. Because much of that's going to be simply just copy and pasting it. This is the way it used to be done in an XML file. Now this is the way it's done as a OSGi declarative service. So, but we've not yet started work on that. We've started work. We've got a lot of work on the migrator. It can already detect about 70 different potential problems. We're going to add many more to it. And so hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have this tool available as a Eclipse plugin. People can use it. We want to encourage community people that have actually started to work on 7.0 conversions, migrations, can say, hey, this is a gotcha. You need to add this to that new migrator tool that you're working on. We're going to solicit feedback. My team is going to be asking for feedback from the core team on what type of things do we need to be looking out for when we're migrating from a 6.2 to 7.0. The idea, all of the smarts, all the collective information that we can find within the Liferay organization, we're going to codify and encode into this migration tool. And so that you simply can just run this tool on your 6.2 plugin, and you will immediately be as smart as all of the core engineers and all of the documentation and all of the tooling people at Liferay, because we will have put everything in this tool that we know of. Now, that don't mean it'll be everything. The community will find lots of other ways that we break stuff in 7.0, I'm sure. And so, and lots of other required steps that you needed to take to get your code to work. We need that feedback sooner than later, so we can also add that into this plugin migration tool. And the good thing about this is that any smarts and any code that's going to be available is also be available as a command line, also be available as a library, so that people that are IntelliJ users can also run this migration tool and can get a report of what all do I need to migrate. So right now, I ran the tool, migration tool command line, but you can also tell it, let's see, what's the option on this? I forgot. Options, oh yeah. So we can say HTML output. So the idea is that it will just spit out an HTML document for the migration that you need to do. And so then it could be like a little report that you could run, and then as a developer you could go through and it would have links to all the breaking changes. You're not going to have the nice to-do list that we'll be able to do in Eclipse, where you can mark things done and mark things undone, and ignore and kind of keep a track of what you need to migrate. But at least you can run a report and have an XML or HTML output of all the breaking changes in your plugin, and then have links to the various places where, you know, either dev.life links or Google Docs or breaking change docs, that kind of thing, or examples in Blade or whatever is relevant. We can make that available. So
where do we get the Blade tool that you just ran?
Yeah, so there is a repository called Blade Tools here, and it's just on my repository, G Amerson, and then Blade Tools, and there is a install. You build it and you install it, and then when you get done, basically the tool is blade.jar, and you can just invoke it java.jar. So if you go to the Blade, you clone the Blade Tools repo, and you run the build, there is a CLI is generated here. There, blade.jar, and you can say java jar. So that's it. It's just an executable jar file, and you can run. There's a create command in here, so you can create new 7.0 projects. There's a deploy tool and the migrate tool. Those are all going to be in here, and the GitHub repository has all the installation. But all that Blade thing is, just so you know, this thing uses a program called JPM, Java Package Manager, and it's written by the same team that wrote BND Live, the same team that wrote BND Tools. It's just a clone of NPM, but for Java. So the first thing you have to install is this thing called JPM, and it is everything that you would want for a Java package manager. So it took all the good ideas from NPM, and it's just available for Java. And it's basically just, it maintains a repository of jars in your system that are executable jars. So you don't just say java-jar, blah, blah, blah. It just keeps a bunch of shell scripts. So if I actually look at JPM tool itself, or look at a BND tool, which is another OSGi development tool, it's basically a drop-in replacement for the jar command and the JVM, but with a whole bunch more goodies. You can see it's got a lot more stuff in it, and all it does is it just puts, same for Mac and for Linux and Windows. All it is just a shell script that invokes Java on a jar that's in some var JVM repo, whatever. So if you follow it makes it executable and all that good jazz. So if you follow the instructions, the first thing it does is it shows you how to install JPM. This one-liner to install JPM for Mac and Linux. Windows has a little installer, and then once you have that, you build the CLI jar, and then you just install it. You can either download, if you don't want to build it, you can just download it right here. This will download the latest version, and then you can install it using this command.
How does it talk to your runtime? Does it just out of the box default configuration?
It uses, the way it talks to the Liferay 7 runtime is it uses the JDK attach API.
Okay.
And it searches through all the JVMs that are running on your box until it finds Liferay. So if you have 2 copies of Liferay, it won't work. It'll just install it in the first one it finds. So
okay.
But yeah, that's what it does, James.
That migrator tool looks amazing. Do you know? Can you comment on what it will do or not do for front end code?
Great question. It will do some things for CSS files, and it will do some things for it automatically does JSP, so it'll get in your JSP tags. But front end, if he means JavaScript APIs and like Allo UI,
yep.
No, I'm sorry, it will not. It has no support for that yet. However, I know the Allo UI team, the front end team at Liferay is building a lot of tools in this same vein. They're building new Node.js tools for front end stuff. They may have a migrator working. I know that Ilian built a migrator for 6.1 to 6.2.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep, I remember that script.
It was a little Java, it was a little Node.js script that would do that. So I would imagine, look for the front end team. They will do something like that. They will not leave all the Liferay developers in hanging at the wind. But
Yeah,
the Blade tool,
yeah, go ahead.
the Blade tool is more going to be focused on the Java, J, and the back end developers,
Right.
and it has no front end stuff planned.
Yeah, and I know the front end stuff is still it's new and it's still in flux. So I imagine as that gets more solidified in the next month or two, that migration tool will be possible.
Yeah. So like, so we can also use Blade to create new projects. So here's another example. In Liferay IDE 3.0, we're going to have instead of new Liferay plugin, that's war style. We're going to call it new Liferay module. That's going to be OSGi style, building jars bundle. So new Liferay 7 module, and then you'll be able to select, is it a service? Is it a portlet? Is it a indexer? Is it a hook? Is it, what type of extension? Liferay 7 has about 125 different extension / integration points, and there's being more added all the time. I think last I saw there were 512 modules inside Liferay 7, M7. So they're not all running at runtime, only about 300 of them running at runtime. But you can imagine probably at least 50% of those modules have some type of API, have some type of extension point for Liferay 7 developers. So there's going to be a lot of different bundles, a lot of different modules that we can build for Liferay 7. And the IDE will guide you through creating a module that's just tailored to what extension / integration point you're wanting. But anything that we do in Liferay 7 for like new project modules, new project templates, new code templates, we're going to make available in the command line too. So for example, we can say Blade create, and it will say you can basically create a new kind of project. So demo portlet, and then you can specify what build system you want, Maven or Gradle. By default, it's Gradle, mainly because Maven users will likely just use Maven archetypes. But there is no Gradle archetype that we know of, that I know of. Let me know if there is one.
Well, what's this going to do when you run that?
There's a Gradle init plugin, but it only covers some very basic ones. I don't yet know of a way to say Gradle init Liferay 7 module foo, whatever. So in absence of that, we're going to provide that same type of tool. So by default, the Blade tool will create Gradle projects, and then you just give it the name, and then version 7.0 by default, and then.
And type is like portlet or service builder or hook.
Exactly, service builder, service. I'll just create a portlet. So there's my demo portlet. And looks like it didn't like the dot. So there's some bugs, but the idea is you can say Gradle build. It fails because of that weird dot. Okay, let's try again. You're still fussy. Okay, so the build tool needs some refinement. I mean the create tool. But the idea is that it'll generate a working portlet you can deploy. So nice. If you don't want to look at the Blade, and this is going to be using DS annotations. Another one it can do is if you want to extend the service pre-wrapper, that's the action that you're going to do. And I'm just making this up. That's not right. But just for demonstration purposes, I want to show. Okay. so I'm not doing it right. But anyway,
I get the idea.
The idea is that you'll be able to create a component. You'll be able to create a project that generates the at component and puts in, wires in the right service and has the right properties and all that stuff. And then you could then build it and deploy it. And so we'll make all those options available with the IDE. You can also do Maven, of course, and say, but this is not as important because Maven has archetypes. So, but we wanted to make it available because basically we're going to have this available in the IDE, being able to create new type of Liferay 7 modules, and we didn't want to put anything in the IDE that couldn't also be called from the library, from the build tool externally. That's kind of the whole modularization idea.
If a developer wants to get involved and track these things that are happening over the next several months, what's the best way to check
follow
this stuff out?
Follow the Blade repository. That's where we're putting new examples of how to use the modular tools. There's many new Gradle plugins that we have not yet shown in Blade, things that are being built by Liferay core team, like the Liferay plugin for building wars. So there is going to be a way to build wars with Gradle. It's not just jars. If you want to build, we've got ways to build wars right now. That's Ant or Maven. If you want to build wars with Gradle, there is a Gradle plugin for building Liferay wars for 7.0 that will be available. So, that's what the core team itself is using. It will be using at some point. So there's many other plugins out there. So you can watch core, but you can also watch the Blade repo on Roddy, on Ray Auger's repo, and you can watch the blade.tools repo that's on my account for changes to the migration tool. That's where all the code for migration tools going, and also watch the blog watch the blog space when we start blogging about IDE 3.0 milestone 1. We do want to have a milestone 1 release by the end of this month, and it will be the first version of the migration tool, both the command line one and the Eclipse based one. And so we'll have that in there, milestone 1. So yeah, just watch the blog, watch the Liferay 7 expedition. What's it called?
Community expedition. I was just about to plug it.
Yeah, once we have some things to play around with, I like to post some links out there. So James, help me remember to follow up on that, to post some of the things that I've talked about in this call. So
I'll be your overly attached fanboy for the next 2 months. Let's see. So one other question, then we'll close. And this is an easy one. We should end on the easy one. Somebody earlier asked, the Go-Go shell.
Yeah.
And I know it's possible to do that, but I was wondering if you could show us how to integrate that into Eclipse. If I just wanted to click a button and have the Go-Go shell pop up.
Yeah. So great question. So for Liferay 3.0, we do plan on having a nice little menu here. Right-click and say Open Go-Go shell. Okay. So that's going to be the easy way. But it's just Telnet. So Eclipse has a terminals view.
Yeah, yep. You just set up like a pre-created one called Go-Go Shell as a tool in Eclipse.
Yeah. So there's just you can just say Telnet terminal, and here we are.
Nice.
There is a gotcha with the Telnet shell inside the Go-Go shell inside of Eclipse. And that is, there's no backspace. So there is delete, but you have to go arrow and then delete. So there's
another really important gotcha, which is, I don't know if Ray fixed it yet, but if you type exit, it shuts down the OSGi container in Liferay.
Yeah, that's not what you want. It shuts down the whole JVM.
You want to use disconnect. I discovered this yesterday. So disconnect will do what you think it should do.
Thank you. I've killed umpteen Liferay JVMs that way. So, but yeah, we're going to get that fixed so that it's a little bit more, because the Go-Go shell is great. The Go-Go shell is just a great way. And what's nice about the modularization of Liferay 7 is if I go here, okay, so you can see this Liferay plugin migration is available as this pretty view. But if I open up the GoGo shell that's inside of Eclipse, as you guys probably know, Eclipse is OSGi. So I can actually click the console and say load the GoGo shell that's in Eclipse, right? So now I can show the 1,000 or something bundles that are running in Eclipse. And what's nice is that because those migration tools are they're actually written as OSGi services. So now there's a migrate command in the GoGo shell. So you could say migrate so there we go. Now I'm running the migration tool. Same one that you saw on the command line, the same one that we showed in Eclipse. Now it's running from the GoGo shell. So same thing for create, same thing for deploy. I mean, of course, once you're in the GoGo shell, you can just use other OSGi APIs. But that's just the with the flavor of what we're trying to do for 7.0 is quit building tools that are siloed, that only work in this environment, only work in that environment. Build things more modularly, they can be reused. That's kind of the holy grail of modularization. One of them is better software reuse. So
should we file a ticket for the ability to deploy remotely from IDE?
Absolutely.
I think Dennis asked that on IRC.
It'll get lost in all of the other tickets that are outstanding for 3.0 M1. But absolutely, I mean, that's a story we want to do is you know, I mean, is that remote-based deployment. Yeah. But, you know, because it shouldn't be too hard to connect the dots there. So
yeah, okay, and we'll get it filed and we'll get votes for it from the community so that the IDE team is aware of the importance of that.
That's great. That's a great idea. Let me see my notes. We went a little long, James, so I was actually able to cover most of the. Let me see. Okay, we showed the migration. We showed Blade. We showed running. I didn't talk too much about the Maven and Gradle plugins for Eclipse, but that can be another one.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the server publish. Yeah, we kind of hit quite a bit. We can do another call on maybe another Google Hangout on IDE 3.0 M1 once it's taken a little more shape, because there's some subtleties, some not so subtle changes that are going into 3.0 that will be needed. Any 2.2 users are going to definitely need to know. So
okay, and also you're doing a presentation at DevCon, I believe.
Yes, I'll be doing a presentation with all this stuff, a little bit more buttoned up, but it will cover a lot of this stuff plus a little more IDE 3.0 M1. Like we'll probably have some more module support, like creating them, deploying them. I mean, we already have some deployment support. We can deploy 7.0 modules with Maven and Gradle, built with Maven and Gradle so far, and built with the 7.0 plugins SDK. We can do all of those. I didn't get to show the new web stuff, but maybe the web application bundle stuff, but maybe that's for another time.
Yeah, I think it's for another time. So yeah, thanks a lot, Greg. That was really a really great overview of what's coming. I'm certainly excited. I hope everyone else is too. And one other thing on the schedule, not for IDE, but for Liferay 7. So we just had a milestone 7 late back in August, end of August. And I believe that's the last milestone. And so what's going to happen next is what's known as an alpha release. So Liferay 7 alpha, I think, is targeted at the end of this month. And at that point, we'll give some further guidance as to what you can expect for the next couple of months. But alpha is generally like feature complete, kind of like no major stuff going into Liferay 7 at that point. But once that goes out, you'll see it on the expedition. I highly encourage all of you to get involved in our expedition. You'll get a t-shirt and you'll get to learn all this wonderful new stuff coming in Liferay 7. And of course, attend all of our events in the fall, and continue to be present on our forums. All of our developers, including Greg, I know, Greg, you have some teammates that also monitor not only the expedition site, but the general community forum. So we're very active there and definitely want feedback and you to try this stuff and get involved if you can. But I think that's it. So thanks again, Greg, and we'll see
Thanks,
you.
James, for setting it up.
Yeah, see you in a month in Germany. And for the rest of you, again, this video is recorded, so you can go back and check out your favorite highlights. And we will schedule some future dev.life sessions. I'm considering at DevCon doing kind of a live broadcast like I did last year, with a better job of it, because we had some technical issues last year of me sitting in the front row and people's laptops crashing. So that wasn't so good. But hopefully we can sort that out this year. And for those of you who can't make it to our events, you can participate and see some of the content from those events. And I'm sure that the events themselves, the event coordinators are also recording several of the sessions, if not all of them, and they will be available after the events. So with that, we'll close, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Greg, and thanks to all of you out there for watching, and look forward to future awesomeness in Liferay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.